Hello and welcome back to the Wrestling Group. I'm your host, as always, Ryan, and today we are going to be talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling. They are being talked about quite a bit as of late, as AEW seems to be signing up all their top stars. Over the last year and a half, a lot of New Japan stars have started to sign with AEW. You know, we've had Aussie Open, Shibata. There's been Kota Ibushi, Kazuchika Okada, Will Ospreay, Jay White. You know, so many big names in New Japan Pro Wrestling are now signed with AEW. So people are wondering what is going on with New Japan Pro Wrestling and what it means going forward for them. So the main issue and problem that's been in New Japan Pro Wrestling obviously is the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit a few years back, a lot of wrestling companies were able to continue putting on shows. You know, AEW put on shows and they were able to use other wrestlers at ringside to create a bit of an atmosphere. You know, WWE done the Thunderdome with the screens and fans could tune in and watch on the screens, and then they'd be on the television. And they were able to still do pay-per-views and weekly shows. Obviously, New Japan, they don't do weekly television like what the American companies do. But obviously they do the specials, like, you know, the tournaments for like the New Japan Cup, which is ongoing at the moment, the G1, the Tag League, and then obviously we have all the pay-per-views that they do as well. But the laws in Japan were completely different to the laws over here, so they were not able to continue for a long period of time with any wrestling shows. And then when they did, and they finally started to do it, and they done a few shows that were no fans. At this point, a lot of companies like AEW and WWE, Ring of Honor as well, because Ring of Honor was a separate entity during the pandemic. They were also one of the last ones to come back. But when they eventually started to come back and do the no fan shows, these other companies had started to let fans in. So we had we had like a low number of fans. If you remember, you'd see pictures of like 2 or 3 people, and then about 2 or 3 rows back there was like another 2, like scattered here, there and everywhere. They could only have so many people. So like New Japan was so far behind in a lot of things in regards to pandemics. They were losing a hell of a lot of money, and they weren't having any fresh content to put on New Japan World to a lot of people, because everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people were out of work at the time. A lot of people then started looking at their bills and cancelling subscriptions. So the New Japan World subscriptions went down. There was no new content, nothing basically viable for your money. So people were cancelling New Japan subscription services, so they were losing money that way too. As far as I'm aware, I can't remember too much, but as far as I'm aware, they actually weren't putting out any new merchandise either, whereas AEW and WWE did still continue to sell and promote new merchandise, t-shirts, hats and stuff like that. So they were still bringing money in that way. People obviously sat at home with money, you know, that they couldn't spend, they couldn't go to shops to spend and stuff, so go online and support like AEW, WWE, and buy the t-shirts, pro wrestling tees as well. But New Japan, I'm pretty sure, if they did put any new merchandise on, it wasn't at the levels of these other companies. They weren't bringing in merchandise sales. So practically at one point they were bringing in literally next to no money at all. And because a lot of the wrestlers, like the high end wrestlers, your Naito's, your Tanahashi's, your Okadas, your Ospreys, your Shingos, all the big names in the company, Jay White, Jeff Cobb, all on exclusive contracts. So New Japan were still paying their wrestlers, they weren't paying them the full amount, which is understandable because they didn't have the full amount, but they were still paying their wrestlers. So they're paying a roster with basically no money. So they were obviously using funds that they'd had from previous profits that they were making. So they weren't bringing in new subscriptions, they weren't bringing in money for new merchandise, and they weren't obviously bringing in any attendance fees either, because they weren't open for business. So That being said, so there's a lot of money there that they didn't have for a long period of time. The money that they did have, they were paying wrestlers, and then obviously when they did eventually start opening back up, it was quite a while after the other companies, the American companies, before they started to allow fans. I think the Wrestle Kingdom that year was the first time. In fact, it went on for like 2 years in Japan, so it was like was it Wrestle Kingdom 2022, I think. It was the first time they allowed fans back in the arena properly, where they had a full capacity, because for so long again it was like what it was in America. It was a lot restricted and stuff like that, but they were a hell of a lot later than everyone else. I think it was the same year that Drew McIntyre won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, so therefore like at that WrestleMania, it was the pandemic one. So then the one after that was a full capacity WrestleMania, whereas New Japan was still not putting on even half capacity. So I believe that attendance at the time was around 30% of what they normally have. So you can imagine it was quite low numbers. And then, like I say, everyone else saw they open the doors, they're fighting and fighting, because the rules are completely different in Japan. And you know, a lot of the roster then, when these did start doing the closed shows, a lot of the roster then started to get closed down. I remember when they were doing oh, I can't remember the pay per view now. I should have wrote it down. Starts doing the pay per view, and it was Will Ospreay versus Shingo in the main event for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Half of the card beforehand, about 3-4 hours before they went live, got changed because a lot of the wrestlers were then getting COVID. So then it made them double down. So then they were doing this a period of time that when they were doing shows, their wrestlers would have to isolate for 14 days in a room on their own before then doing a match. Whereas it was nothing, absolutely nothing like that at all in WE and AEW. 14 days on your own, sat in a room before you can do one show is ridiculous. So basically, the pandemic cost them a lot. And when they come out of the pandemic and they started getting the full attendance shows and stuff again, you know, they did start to see profit margins go up again, but not by as much as what you'd think, you know, because at this point, like I say, a lot of people had obviously spent money on other things, and like subscriptions were down, merchandise sales were down, attendances were down. So you know, they didn't get full capacity, actual full capacity. They could open up to full capacity, but they didn't get full capacity crowds for about another 6 months after them being allowed to let the crowds back in. And the main reason behind that was because in Japan, if you remember, they weren't allowed to cheer. The Japanese government decided that, obviously with it being a pandemic, COVID was through breathing and through your mouth and talking and stuff like that. So when they then went to airborne, that's the word, I couldn't think of it. It's an airborne virus, you know, when you're talking that you can breathe it in. And so they obviously went with the masks, but they weren't allowed to speak, they weren't allowed to cheer and stuff. So a lot of fans stayed away. They didn't want to attend. They didn't want to attend a wrestling show where basically you could clap your hands, stamp your feet. I mean, that's not what it's all about, you know. When you have the likes of Will Ospreay coming out, or like Jay White, or like Kazuchika Okada, you want to be able to cheer and make a better noise, you know what I mean? Especially if there's like a high spot in the match or something, if someone gets dropped on the head, you want to go, ooh, something like that, you know what I mean? You couldn't do none of that. So the attendances stayed down until that year's Wrestle Kingdom. So they did lose a hell of a lot of money, basically through the pandemic. They did reduce contracts down to be able to pay, but I know then a lot of wrestlers' contracts then never went up again when they went back to full board. And I think that this is one of the main reasons now why we have the situation where wrestlers are leaving to go elsewhere, because New Japan haven't got the money to be able to pay the contracts that they would have been on. So the new contracts that they offered, Will Ospreay, Kazuchika Okada, Jay White, they were a lot less. I believe they were only 70% of the actual wages that they were having pre-pandemic. So all these guys are on obviously top dollar, they're all big names. But when their contracts then came up for renewal, and New Japan were only offering them 70% of what they'd had previously, and then you've got WE and AEW that are offering you a lot more than what New Japan were, and obviously AEW can offer like silly amounts of money at the moment. You know, it's no wonder that they're now going elsewhere. I mean, I know a lot of them are like, oh, yeah, I've completed everything I can in New Japan Pro Wrestling. You know, it's now time to look elsewhere, and that's probably a reality to a certain extent. But you know, especially with Okada, it's a big eye opener. You know, someone basically is a god in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then he goes and leaves and goes to AEW. Yes, he's completed a lot of things in New Japan in regards to obviously being a 7-time world champion. I think he's a 2-time New Japan Cup winner. I don't remember, is it 4 or 5 G1s he's won now? So he has done a lot of things there, but there's also a lot of things that he still hasn't done, like the mid cards. He's never held a mid card title. He's held the 6-man tag team championships, but he's never held the normal ones. So there's a couple of things, not a lot, not major things, but I'm pretty sure if they were offering the kind of money that he was used to at one point, then he probably would have stuck around. And the same with the likes of Ospreay and Jay White. You know, there's still a lot that they could have told in New Japan, even though, you know, they say, oh, you know, we've completed everything, want to go elsewhere. Obviously, the law of American television, and the fact that they're a bigger company, you know, that obviously is always going to be there. But being offered only 70% of your wages, in a new contract, that's the main reason why they're now starting to leave and go elsewhere. And obviously they're going on to like AEW. So with AEW, they still have that standing relationship with New Japan. So they never say never. They could always still get to do the Tokyo Dome for Wrestle Kingdom if, you know, New Japan so much wanted to in the future going forward, while still being signed to AEW. So a big main issue, obviously for New Japan Pro Wrestling, was obviously the pandemic. I think last year, I think it was reported that they only made a profit of between 8 and 10,000, which is ridiculous to think of a massive company like that. So they are turning a profit, but it's a very, very, very small margin. You know, between 8 and 10 grand for a massive company with a rich history like that. So it's also the reason why we have now wrestlers in New Japan, the likes of Driller Maloney, Joseph Connors, I think TJP. There's so many wrestlers now that wrestle on the roster without actual contracts for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and they deserve to have the contracts. But the new markup, the way they do things now going forward, is they done it years ago with the likes of Ibushi. For years he didn't have an exclusive New Japan contract, and then when he finally did sign one, and then he went and done the show he wasn't supposed to with the fireworks and all that on the card, and caused a lot of crap, and ended up sitting out for a year of his career. But just pre-pandemic, I think 2018, 2019, they were starting to give a lot of the talent contracts, so it wasn't just the main stars like what they have done in the past. And then they got hit massively hard with this situation, basically because of the pandemic. They now had twice as many wrestlers as they would have had previously on contracts that they then were trying to find a way to pay. So now going forward, they're not going to be handing out the contracts as easy as what they have done for like 2017, 18, 19, because who knows, there might ever become a case again where some sort of national pandemic hits again. You've got to try and find money to pay for all these guys' contracts. So that's why we have wrestlers at the moment that aren't signed with exclusive deals. Like see, Aussie Open weren't signed for an exclusive deal. You know, Shibata wasn't signed with an exclusive deal. You know, they weren't signed with New Japan contracts, so that's why it was easier for Tony to be able to sign them guys. In regards to like a Jay White or Will Ospreay, a Kazuchika Okada, their contracts had to expire obviously before. They come in and done shows previously, got a little taste of AEW, but obviously they weren't able to just be signed like that, whereas the likes of Aussie Open and Shibata, they were able to be signed basically as and when they wanted to, because they didn't have actual contracts with New Japan. So that is the situation. That's why, like I say, a lot of wrestlers don't have New Japan contracts, and that is why a lot of the big guys have been moving, because they can't offer the kind of money that they once could. They've had to tone a lot of the spending down. They're not going to be able to be bringing in big names themselves going forward in the future. So the fact they've got the working relationship with Impact, they've got the working relationship with AEW. You know, they take a percentage of the pay-per-views that they do. They do the multiverse. I think twice a year for New Japan and Impact. They'll make a percentage out of that, which is really good. And obviously with the Forbidden Door pay-per-views as well that they do every year, AEW and New Japan, you know, they're going to make a good amount of money from that too. So they are finding their way back on the feet. They're not in any way, shape or form ready to go under, go down or anything, but getting these big guys off these wage bills that they've managed to do with them going to AEW does then help obviously push them on for the future. You know, it gives that profit sustainability where they don't have to be paying out ridiculous amounts of money if they don't make that much basically, and because they're still trying to cover over what they lost during the pandemic. And like say New Japan, because the Japanese government, they were one of the last to come back, and they were one of the last to have full attendances. So like say they weren't putting out new matches, they weren't putting out new merchandise, so they lost a hell of a lot of money through a lot of these things during those 2 years that they couldn't do full shows for. So, but going forward, you know, you've still got a lot of guys there that are big name draws. You've got your Naitos, your Tanahashis, the likes of them going forward. But they are starting to look at the next generation talents and push them up. And I believe I'm not 100% sure, but the likes of David Finlay, Shota Umino, they have exclusive contracts. So that means they are signed with New Japan. So the likes of these guys are probably going to start to get pushed as the main event scene in the next 2 to 3 years. So there you have it. That is New Japan and the reason why a lot of their big stars are leaving. So as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings about New Japan, and let me know basically your thoughts on the video. There's nothing else I can say. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on this video of New Japan Pro Wrestling and why obviously a lot of the big names are leaving. And do you think that there's going to be enough draw in the next year or two when they do the rebuild on Tanahashi that people are going to start coming back and start watching more New Japan Pro Wrestling? So as always, like I say, give me a like, comment, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more wrestling related content coming your way very, very soon.